The number of victims in Jasenovcu was at least 700,000. I am standing behind this number and nobody is going to argue with me about this.
Posebno oružje za ubijanje jednog naroda kao što je Srbasijek.
Even the German Nazis did not have special camps for children. This is a special cruelty of the Ustaša.
Šta se desilo u Srebrenici?
And we came to the conclusion that this crime, which was conducted there, which is a crime, cannot be defined as genocide.
Kosovo i Metohija danas u srpskom narodu.
It's a question of history, of religion, of heritage. And a nation needs to be connected to its history, to its heritage. You cannot disconnect it. It's not natural.
Dobro večer, dragi gledalci. Dobrodošli u još jednu emisiju Rubikon. Naš večerašnji gost je najveći istoričar koji se bavi temom holokausta. Koautor je stalne postavke u memorijalnom centru Yad Vashem. I jedini je istoričar koji se bavio upoređivanjem zločina u Auschwitzu i Jasenovcu. Dame i gospodo, doktor, odnosno istoričar kako smo predstavili, Gideon Grajf. Dobrodošli.
Good evening. Thank you for hosting me here.
Zadovoljstvo nam je, verujte. Prvo pitanje. Koji su događaji, kad smo već pomenuli holokaust, doveli do holokausta? Da li je današnja geopolitička situacija slična tom periodu i koliko nas to podsjeća?
The question you have presented to me is huge, so let me divide it into two parts. First of all, I would like to mention some points which enabled this catastrophe, which was the biggest catastrophe in the history of mankind. Unfortunately, we Jews were the main victim. I would mention the following. First of all, the non-limited extreme hatred of the Germans and their collaborators in many countries towards Jews. Although Jews did not hate Germans, on the contrary, they loved them, they adored them. German Jews were ready to die for Germany. For whom did they die? For Israel, for the United States, for Germany. And still, when the National Socialist Party came to power, the Jews were main target, blaming them in being the source for all negative phenomena in the world, which is, of course, stupid nonsense, but millions of Germans believed in it. This is one point. Then the fact that this criminal regime had the tools to implement this murderous policy, the SS, the SA, the SD. The whole nation was recruited in order to implement a crazy idea of killing all Jews all over the world. And I have to emphasize that if this plan would have been implemented totally, I, Gideon Grajf, wouldn't sit here today in Belgrade, because the plan was to eliminate all Jews. There shouldn't remain one Jew alive all over the world. This is the plan called the final solution of the Jewish people. Thanks God that the Germans and their collaborators could complete only 65 to 70%. They murdered about 6 million Jews, which at that time was 1/3 of the Jewish people. Think about it, 1/3 of the Jews were murdered, brutally murdered by the Germans and their collaborators. Demographs made some calculation. If the Holocaust would just be a dream, the Jewish people would now count about 40 million all over the world, not only in Israel. But we count only 15,2 or 3 million. So after 100 years from the end of the Holocaust, we still did not overcome this demographical loss. And I'm doubtful if we ever will be able to fill the gap. Not to mention any other catastrophes which the Germans did to Jewish people, eliminating patterns of Jewish life, like the shtetl, the Jewish little village. Many of them were in Poland, in Eastern Europe, etc. So the catastrophe is really, really huge. And I have to say, to emphasize, that we will not be able to recover this catastrophe ever, unfortunately. And one more point why the Holocaust was possible is the weakness of the Jews at that time. You know, the Jews were not living in their own country. They were dispersed. They didn't have their own army to protect them. They were totally dependent on the local population, on the local governments, which also hated Jews in most cases. So the Jews were totally neglected. Totally neglected. Nobody defended them. They really were totally neglected, and the Germans could murder them. And this is one side of the tragedy, the weakness of the Jewish people. This was one part of your question. So let me refer to the second. The catastrophe of October 7th is really huge, and there are many similar points or patterns used by the Hamas murderers and the German Nazi murderers. But still, it is not the Holocaust. It's similar. The patterns, the hatred towards Jews, the sadistic manner, burning alive Jews in all these kibbutzim there in the south of Israel, torturing Jews, raping women. We know this from the Holocaust, but still you cannot compare. The Holocaust is unique, and as such we should interpret it and remember it. But the catastrophe of October 7th is the worst in the history of the State of Israel, which is now 76 years old. But still, the Holocaust is the Holocaust, and the Simchat Torah, this is the name of the holiday of that day, is a big catastrophe in our history, but it's not exactly the same. It's different. It's different. The Holocaust is unique.
Koliko je kultura sećanja na takve događaje važna i koliko su slični koncentracioni logori u nezavisnoj državi Hrvatskoj i nacističkoj Nemačkoj?
That's a very important question. Thank you. First of all, we Jews, we remember. Let me give you an example. We celebrate every year various events which happened not yesterday, hundreds or thousands of years ago, like Passover. Yes, our departure from Egypt. It happened not yesterday, not the previous week. Thousands of years ago, and we still celebrate it every year. We remember. We remember the destruction of the first and second temple. 3,000 years ago. We don't have to remember it, but we want to remember it because it's a chain. You know, history of a nation is a chain of events, good events and bad events. You cannot forget the bad events and remember only the good ones. It's not natural. Like in the private life, we have better times and non-better times. So we Jews really remember, and I think this gives us a special strength. Now to the catastrophe of the Serbian people, which is really very, very similar to our fate. You were persecuted, you were murdered, you lost 700,000 people in Jasenovcu's chain of extermination camps. I was told that the number of Serbs nowadays could have reached 80 million, and you're very far from that calculation, from that demographical data. So we have a lot of common. Our history and your history in many aspects is very similar. And I think this is one of the reasons that we feel like brothers. And the friendship between the Serbian people and the Jewish people is very, very strong. I have to tell you, when I first came to Serbia, it was about 10 years ago, I remember it. From the first second, I felt at home. I cannot even explain it. I felt friendship. I felt it was a very good feeling. And it didn't change since then. I see myself really as a big friend of the Serbian people, and I'm proud about this, and nobody is going to take this friendship away from me. Nobody. And so your history in many aspects is really similar to ours. You were hated, you were persecuted, you had to fight for your identity, for your freedom, for your independence. We had the same. We had the same. The State of Israel was established only in 1948, so we are an ancient people, but not an ancient state. And we still, as you know, have to fight for security, for independence, and our nice neighbors, cynically said, want to eliminate us. The only goal of Hamas was to kill Jews, as many as possible. To kill Jews, to capture Jews. This hatred, referring to your first question, is really very similar. Horrible hatred, with no reason. We did nothing wrong. But this hatred dictates to them this sadistic, murderous behavior. We are still under danger of life in the State of Israel, which has a very strong army, And still, we are under danger of existence. It's existential danger. Even now, in 2024, can you imagine?
Sličnost između logora u nezavisnoj državi Hrvatskoj i nacističkoj Nemačkoj, da li i to može da nas poveže kao kroz istoriju?
I'm sorry, you asked me already and I forgot to answer. Let me do it now. Again, as I compared between the German Nazis and the Hamas and other enemies of our people, the methods of the cruel Croats and the Ustaša regime were very similar to the German ones, but with some differences, which I describe in one of the 3 trilogy books, Jasenovac, Auschwitz of the Balkans. And Jasenovac indeed was Auschwitz of the Balkans. I'm dedicating almost 52 years of my life to the research of Auschwitz. I think I know everything about Auschwitz and I can compare. And I did this comparison. For the first time, I'm the first historian in the world which did such a comparison between Jasenovac's chain of camps and Auschwitz. I would say that the manner of murder of the Ustaša was more primitive, more barbaric. They enjoyed to see their enemies bleeding to death. They enjoyed to cut their heads. You see here, there is this knife. They invented especially to cut heads. In one night, they could murder brutally 1,000. There was one competition once in Jasenovac who will cut more heads of Serbs and Jews and Roma. This was such a passion of murdering. So they invented this knife which you bear like a glove on your hand. It makes easy to kill, to take off your head. And so they enjoyed seeing their enemies, they were not their enemies, to see them die. The Germans were more sterile. They didn't want to see their victims die before their eyes, before they invented the gas chambers. You don't have to see your victim dying of suffocation. You open the gas, let them die. The Ustaša was more barbaric, more primitive. They wanted to see, to touch the blood, to have the blood on their body. So both the Germans and the Ustaša wanted to kill the Ustaša as many Serbs, as many Jews, as many Roma and others. And the Germans, primarily Jews, not only. But I think the Ustaša way of killing was much more primitive, like in ancient times. And in my book, I also discovered, can you imagine, 57 ways of killing, as if one is not enough. Believe me, one is enough. But they developed the art of killing, the Ustaša. They were so barbaric, so sadistic. God knows where they take it from. Such a cruelty. How can a person be so cruel? But they were. They enjoyed it. In my book and other books, you can find photos how they enjoy torturing, burning alive, torturing women, kids, babies. They took even babies out of the belly of the women, pregnant women. You ask yourself, where did they learn all these cruel methods? Where did they take it from? This is horrible. But I was decided to describe in detail all the 57 manners to show how cruel the Ustaša was. And what is very frustrating to me and to decent people all over the world is that they deny or tend to deny their crimes. You cannot rewrite history, I'm sorry. You cannot hide history under this carpet. You can't. The truth at the end comes out, and all the crimes of the Ustaša, of the Croat Ustaša, will be known, if not today, tomorrow, and if not tomorrow, the next week. So one of my goals was to explore the crimes, to publish them as a warning. We should never be under such situation, not the Serbs, not the Jews, not Roma, not anybody. Such cruelty should never, never, never be conducted again, never. Allow me to add one point of comparison between the Croat Ustasha camps and Auschwitz. Jasenovac's chain of camps was so primitive that even not real work was supplied or given to the prisoners. In Auschwitz, there was a part called Buna Monowitz, in which there was a real industry. German concerns and factories established there some branches in order to exploit the prisoners. IG Farben and other, Volkswagen and other factories. So there was a real work. The work in the Jasenovac's chain of camps was not a real work. It was just to torture, to humiliate the prisoners. So even in this context, the Germans were a little more cultured or more humane than the Ustasha Croats. No real work was conducted in the chain of camps called Jasenovac. The only intention was to humiliate the prisoners, to torture them, and finally to murder them.
A priča o predstavama i zarobljenicima koji se u Jasenovcu koji se tamo zabavljaju, kako to vama zvuči?
This is really annoying to portray hell on earth like a pleasant place. How can people dare to do it? This is really an insult of history. We know Jasenovac and all the camps around were hell on earth. If there is hell, it's there. The same I say about Auschwitz. If there is hell, it's Auschwitz and its 44 sub-camps. But this attempt to portray Jasenovac as a nice place will also fail. Truth is stronger than anything else. You cannot change history. You can't, even if you want. No, it wasn't a nice place. It was hell on earth. And like this, as such, we should remember it. It's giving respect to the tortured and humiliated prisoners. They knew the truth, and we know the truth. And nobody is going to change it. Nobody.
Koliko je ljudi zapravo ubijeno u Jasenovcu i zašto se te cifre stalno dovode u neku sumnju i preispituju i menjaju?
You can ask the same question about the denial of the Holocaust. We know the number is 6 million and nothing can change it. It's a fact. It's a fact. And the same tendency to reduce the measures of crime is in the case of Jasenovac. The killers, which are still alive, or their children, want to minimize the scope of the crimes, but they will not succeed. They can't succeed. I'm standing firmly behind the number of 700,000. I did not invent it. I was using very serious scientific works. The most important work is of a friend of mine, which I consider the best historian on the fate of Yugoslavian Jews and the history of Jasenovac, the late Professor Menachem Shelach, an Israeli historian who was born in ex-Yugoslavia, and he wrote the really masterpiece called, in Hebrew, The History of the Holocaust - Yugoslavia, where he mentions several times that the number of victims in Jasenovac was at least 700,000. And I accept this number. I have no doubt about this, and I'm standing behind this number, and nobody is going to argue with me about this. This is the number, and it is mentioned in hundreds of books and researches and articles. And this tendency to minimize it is very similar to what we call denial of Holocaust, saying that the number of Jews which were murdered is not 6 million, it's maybe 4 or 3 or even less. You know what is the horrible thing about the minimizing of Jasenovac's number and the minimizing of the Holocaust? This is the second murder of the victims. They were murdered once and now they want to murder them for the second time. This should not be accepted. This is a crime. And we have to fight against this crime. Murdering twice is really unacceptable. And one of my goals is to fight against this second murder of the victims.
Gde su se nalazili, a to nismo pomenuli, logori za decu?
Even the German Nazis did not have special camps for children or for women and children. This is a special cruelty of the Ustascha. As I mentioned before, in many ways they were more cruel, more brutal, more sadistic than the Germans. By the way, they were very influenced by the Germans. You know that Pavelić went to Berlin to meet his beloved Hitler and wanted to show him how NDH is using the same methods of the final solution. So-called independent state of Croatia was imitating Nazi Germany. And unfortunately also in the context of the Jews, to show, we are better than you, we are more brutal than you. And so they established camps for women and children. Even the Germans didn't do it. Can you imagine? So the Croat Ustascha were in many ways more cruel, more brutal, more non-human. 57 methods of killing. And when you see the photos of Serb babies, of Jewish babies and Roma babies, your heart breaks. How can a person be so cruel? But yes, the answer is people can if they want to, and the Croats wanted to be cruel.
U vašoj knjizi opisali ste 57 načina ubijanja u logoru Jasenovac. Pored brutalnosti, zanimljivo je da je u Jasenovcu ubijen čak 91 pripadnik porodice Tesla. I ne samo to, već da je izmišljen poseban nož, posebno oružje za ubijanje jednog naroda kao što je srbosjek. Da li istorija pamti takav slučaj?
I cannot find such examples in the past. Of course, people developed weapons, but not for such a brutal murder. It shows you the way of thinking, the way of sadism, of being like a beast, like a wild beast. It's even not fair towards the beast to say this. Really, like robots, like cruel robots, like machines, living machines. You ask yourself, didn't they have any human feelings, any human sentiments? Most probably the answer is no. Zero. No, they didn't. They liked killing people, they liked murdering people, and I'm asking myself, why did they do it? Or what motivated them? It's hatred, it's brutality. You have to, I'm a historian. I don't have all the answers to your questions. I think part of the answers have to be answered by psychologists, by psychiatrists. It's mad. It's crazy. It's crazy to be so cruel. So cruel. They saw children, babies, women, not 1 milligram of mercy. Not 1 milligram of mercy. It's extreme cruelty, which you don't see every day. It's very, very rare and unique. I would like to add one important point concerning the 57 methods of killing. The question if the German Nazis produced soap from human body was for many years controversial. Now we know that they intended to do it, but they didn't have enough time. So there is no soap, existing soap, made by German Nazis from Holocaust victims. But the Ustascha, the Croat Ustaschas, they did it. They started to manufacture soap from the human body. So you see, they were more extreme, more cruel than the Germans, whom they wanted to imitate. This is a very important point to emphasize. We know that they tried strong to produce soap from the human body, the Croat Ustaschas.
Kada smo na temu Jasenovca, svakako jedna od ličnosti je Alojzije Stepinac. Kako vi razumete sada pokušaje da se on kanonizuje?
This person is a criminal. A person who supports such a criminal, murderous regime cannot be canonized. This is a joke. Come on. He supported Pavelic and the cabinet of NDH, the so-called independent state of Croatia. He gave his blessing. Maybe he himself didn't kill one person. Let's take into consideration that Stepinac did not kill with his own person, even one person. But his blessing, he supported it. He gave support, moral support. This is a crime. This is a crime. He should never, never, never be canonized. And I myself wrote a letter to the Vatican pleading not to bestow on him such a dignity. And this never should happen. Such a person could prevent the crimes, and instead he supported them. He's a criminal. In my eyes, he's a criminal. A murderer. Even if he did not hold this knife and cut the heads of people, but by moral blessing, by religious blessing, he enabled the crimes. He paved the way for the crimes. So he should never, 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 never be canonized. Never. It will be a shame for the whole world and for the church, of course.
Sistem logora Jasenovac je obuhvatao 240 kvadratnih kilometara. Poređenja radi, Auschwitz je samo 40. Zašto je važno se sećamo mesta kao što su Jasenovac, Pag, Drakulići?
You ask why it is important to remember. As I mentioned in the context of the Jewish people, if you do not remember all this chain of this history, you will not have a good future. Because what is the future? It's a combination of the present and the past. Also in private life. There is a big parallelity of private and national life. What you know from your private life is the same, identical with the national life. We cannot run away from our past. Of course, we have good times, less good times. This is life. And a nation should remember also the black times in order to build a better future, because it prepares you for the building of a better, solid future. You can learn from the past. Yes, you can learn from history. We tend to repeat our mistakes, also in private life, We tend to repeat our mistakes. But if you are aware of the mistakes, you will do efforts not to do it. The same in national history. Look backwards, see what was wrong, how to do it better. And in this way, you can ensure your children a better future. And we are obliged to do it for our children, for our grandchildren, to build a better future. We do not want to be involved, not to be prisoners in Jasenovac, not to be murdered in Jasenovac. We want to live a positive, humane, good, pleasant life. This is natural. By knowing the past, you have better chances of building a better future. For you, for your children, for your grandchildren, for your grandchildren. This is the only condition. If you don't learn from history, you will repeat the same mistakes.
Još jedna od tema koja opterećuje ove prostore jeste pitanje šta se desilo u Srebrenici.
As you know, I was the president of the Commission of Investigation. We did a very, very thorough professional job. It's not Gideon's commission. It's a commission of 10 serious people from 10 countries, from Australia, from the United States, from Serbia, from Japan, from Austria, from Germany. And we were sitting 2 full years to investigate. We had no prejudices. Nobody paid us money. Nobody bribed us. Our goal was to reach the truth. The objective truth, as much as objectivity is possible. You never have 100%, but I think we reached 98%. We had no interests for this side, for the other side. And we came to the conclusion that this crime, which was conducted there, which is a crime, cannot be defined as genocide. genocide has its definition. It's a very clear definition. By the way, a Jewish lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, formulated it in 1948 after the Holocaust. And not every crime is a genocide. I'm very sorry. So people were disappointed that we came to this conclusion. But we all 10 came to this conclusion, and we voted for it. And only points which were adopted by the whole commission were written in our report, which is a big one, 1,290 pages. I think all the people who attack us didn't read even one page, even one line, even one word. So let them please read the report. You can find it online in Serbian and in English, good English. And we really did a professional work, and I'm sure, maybe not now, maybe in the future, this document will be taught and learned in the universities as a good example for a professional, objective work. None of us, not a representative from Japan, from Austria, from Germany, from Israel, we had no prejudices. We had no pre-interests. Nobody told us what to write there. We were sitting isolated in a room, a sealed room. A guard was there 24 hours a day. Nobody tried to influence us. Nobody tried to tell us what to write. We are professionals. We wrote a professional report. And I'm really very, very sorry that some people want to attack us. It is really not fair towards the serious scholars which were the Srebrenica Commission. Good people, professional people, decent people, all of us, decent people, who really have done a very good job. I, as the president, can swear to you that the commission was a very good one with no prejudices at all.
Na temu Srebrenice i čitave te pompe, koliko su Srbi predstavljeni kao jedini zločinci u čitavom tom ratu?
During the sessions of our commission, of our Srebrenica commission, as I mentioned, we wanted really to describe the truth, to come to the truth. And what we emphasize in our report is the fact that thousands of innocent Serbs were murdered during the 90s by Croats and their collaborators. So you cannot blame the Serbs of being mass murderers. The opposite is true. The Serbs were victims of a stream, of wave of mass murder in the villages. Whole families were brutally we have even photos of bodies of whole family. The big murderers were not the Serbs, they were the victims, and we describe this in our report. It is so important to define who is victim and who is perpetrator. You cannot mix it. A victim is a victim and a perpetrator is a perpetrator. The Serbs paid a very high price, and thousands of them were murdered in many, many, many villages during the wars of the 90s. This is important to say and to emphasize.
Koliko su ljudi poput generala Davida Elezara poznati danas u Izraelu i koliko su uticali da se Izrael spasi?
I have to emphasize with pride that many ex-Yugoslav Jews played a very significant role in the history of the State of Israel. You mentioned General David Elazar, who is a tragic person because he was the chief of army during the Yom Kippur War, which started so horribly and then became a victory of the Israeli army. And he had to pay a very high price, and therefore he died very young. He was 51 years only, and it's a real tragedy. He was a very good person, and he's not the only ex-Yugoslav Jew who contributed so much to our history. Our ex-Minister of Justice, Mr. Yosef Tomi Lapid from Novi Sad, and many film directors, many theater directors, musicians, Moni Amarillo and others. I can give you dozens, if not hundreds of names of ex-Yugoslav Jews who contributed each in his field, in his professional field. They played a very, very substantial role in the cultural and industrial and military fields in Israel. And you know, when I'm thinking about all those thousands of ex-Yugoslav Jews who were murdered in Jasenovcu and other places, they could have contributed so much for Yugoslavia, for the whole world. We speak about 6 million murdered Jews, but we don't speak enough about 6 million talents who were lost. Musicians, chemists, physicians, conductors, what else? So many talented Jews were murdered. They could have doctors. Maybe nowadays there wouldn't be cancer, COVID, you know. So many gifted Jews were murdered. And the world lost, not only we as a nation. Yugoslavia lost, the whole world lost. These murderers, the Ustascha, the German Nazis, they are so stupid. Instead of protecting the Jews, they murdered them. They lost. They lost. The world today could have been much, much, much better if these 6 million Jews and the thousands of Yugoslav Jews would be alive nowadays. They were so stupid, these murderers, so stupid.
Kako možemo da sprečimo povampirenje ustaštva I nacizma u Evropi danas?
First of all, by fighting all distortions and revisionism. How dare they try to rewrite history? You can't do it. You can't. Facts are facts, and nobody, only God can change them. Fighting distortion, fighting against the admiration of, you know, in Germany now there is a relatively new party called AfD, Alternative für Deutschland. This is a Nazi party. This party should never exist. It should be fought more aggressively by the German government. I wonder why they don't do it. This party cannot take part in the elections, and it does. And the same in that the memory, the positive memory of Ustascha cannot be admired by the state of Croatia or by the young generation. This is bad for them, bad for the world. Distortion of history, revision of history is something dangerous because you lose reality. You make the white black and the black white. This is crazy. This is mad. The world doesn't work like this. They try, but we have to fight back, and in more aggressive ways. More aggressive ways. We are too soft when fighting against such ideologies as you mentioned it. We have in Hebrew I'll try to translate it. The one who shows mercy against cruel people will be the next victim of such people. In many cases in life, you should be more aggressive because you endanger the next generations. Bad people, vicious people have to be fought by all means. And also people who try to rewrite history should be fought aggressively because they endanger our next generations, our children, our grandchildren. No mercy, because as I mentioned, rewriting history or distorting history, revisionized history is like a second murder of the victims, and we should not allow this. Never. We should not allow this. This is a crime, another crime. Unfortunately, Nazism didn't die in 1945 on May 8th when Germany surrendered non-conditionally. This shows us, and the same with the Ustascha ideology, it shows us that evil is more attractive than the good. I don't know why it is so. Evil is more attractive. People are more attracted to vicious, to cruel ideology. The Bible, our Old Testament, already speaks about it. You may know the sentence, the human being is bad-hearted from its birth. He has this tendency to be evil, but it depends on you as a human being. If you decide not to be evil, you can do it. It depends on you. You decide, will I be a criminal or will I be a decent person? So the fact that Ustashism is still alive, Nazism is still alive, is a bad sign for humanity. We learned nothing. And therefore, I repeat, we have to fight against it more brutally, because this is a danger to the world. We have to learn from history. High time to learn from history. We don't want another Jasenovcu. We don't want another Auschwitz. And we can achieve this goal by fighting more aggressively against such Ustashism and Nazism. Such ideologies should disappear forever. Point. Dot. Forever.
I sami govorite kako je istorijski kontinuitet jednog naroda jako važan. Kako i kao istoričar možete posmatrati situaciju koju ima Kosovo i Metohija danas u srpskom narodu?
Well, I'm not here in the position of advising the Republic of Serbia, but according to what I know, Kosovo has a very special meaning in the history of the culture and religious history of your nation. I mean, it's like taking Jerusalem out of the Jewish heart. You cannot. We will never give up. Jerusalem is our capital, and much more than this. This is the living memory of our history, of 3,000 years of history. I think the same with Kosovo, which is the place of birth of your religion, of your heritage, of your culture. I think it is a part which cannot be disconnected from the Serbian nation. I'm not giving you any advice, but it is the heart, the heritage, the history, and I think you cannot live without it. And this is what I have to say, not much more than this. It's not a political question. It's a question of history, of religion, of heritage. And the nation needs to be connected to its history, to its heritage. You cannot disconnect it. It's not natural.
Hvala vam na vremenu koje ste izdvojili za našu emisiju.
Thank you for the questions.
Hvala na svemu ovo što radite.
I'm fighting for truth. And I will continue this fight until my last day. Nobody is going to frighten me. Nobody.
Hvala što ste pratili još jednu našu emisiju. Zapratite kanal emisije Rubikon. Kao što vidite, trudimo se da dovedemo najeminentnije goste na svetu. Ovaj koncept emisije smo prilagodili našem cijenjenom gostu, koji nam je izašao u susret. Molimo vas za komentare, delite sadržaj na društvenim mrežama, jer tako svi zajedno činimo sve što možemo da kockice istorije sljedeći put padnu na nama povoljnu stranu.